Okay, everyone, we're live. Hello, hello, hello. While we wait for people to join today, I'll just go ahead and introduce myself and introduce Dr. Gray. I'm so excited to have her here. I was just before we went live telling her, I was like, I love this about you and I love that about you. And I don't think I even covered it all. So I'm excited Dr. Gray is joining us today. So I'm Dr. Hockman. I'm the medical matchmaker. I help doctors find the jobs of their dreams, which really pairs nicely into what Dr. Gray does. So I'm going to have you introduce yourself, but I'm actually going to then change topics and get back to what you do a little bit later. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about what you do.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much for having me on your show. And I'm a huge fan of yours, Dr. Hoffman. And you were on my podcast. I had so much fun interviewing you last year. And so here we are. I am Dr. Weili Gray. I am a sleep physician. I'm actually employed by a rural critical access hospital in rural Vermont. And I see patients on a part-time basis. And I also do a lot of things. I read sleep studies. I'm the medical director. I wear a lot of hats at my hospital. And so that's my physician job, which I love. I love my job so much. And I am also a registered life planner. And what that is I help physicians figure out what they really want out of their life and how to start living that dream life sooner than they ever imagined. And for that, I founded the Dare to Dream Physician. I also have a podcast with the same name that comes out with a new episode every week. So I'm just so excited to be here and meet people and please reach out to me at any time because I love meeting other doctors.
That's so neat. And I was just saying, I was interviewing Dr. Liz Aguirre last week, and I was referencing her episode on your podcast because it was just mind blowing. It was about a year ago, so everyone go listen to Dare to Dream podcast and find that episode because your mind will be blown. She is so awesome. Um, as is Dr. Gray, obviously, because I have her here today. So I wanted to talk to you before we get to your life planning, because this is such a cool, interesting concept, life planning. But before we even get to that, I wanted to talk about your practice that you have. It's not often that we hear of doctors who say, I have the best job ever. And you're working for a hospital. You're not like, tell me a little bit about what makes your job different. And then I'd like you to go ahead and tell us some things that you were able to do for your hospital. You felt empowered to make some changes, and they actually happened.
Yeah, thanks for asking that. So to preface, that question and my statement of, me loving my job, that was not always the case. About 2 years ago, I was actually at a point where I wanted to quit my job and I wanted to actually just leave medicine because I was so discouraged. And the backstory was I've been at this job. This is my first job as a new attending, and I think this is my eighth year in this job. And so when I first moved to this small little community, moved my family again because as we all know, we move a lot as physicians, and I've had to move my family every single time for internship, for residency, and then for the first job after residency and fellowship. I thought I found this dream job. I love the people I met. And in a way, the environment is very similar to the type of jobs that you help physicians match into, Dr. Hoffman, because it's a small community. Even though it's a hospital, I mean, it's critical access hospitals. The largest they can be is 25 beds. So it's a small community. There's probably, I don't know, maybe 30 some physicians on the med staff. So it was so wonderful. Like I love the small town feel and how everyone worked well with each other, and the people who are sort of doing the practice management side, and administrators of the hospital and the physicians were on great terms. And then when I got really discouraged and when I had that low point of should I quit and even quit medicine, was that it was like when you get to experience how well things can work in healthcare, and then there's a change. That's where, and of course all of us are familiar with the narrative that there's a high rate of physician burnout, and physicians are discouraged. Many are quitting medicine. So finally, when I had sort of a challenge in front of me in my job, I thought, oh, maybe that's happening, and I'm so discouraged by what's happening that I'm probably never going to find anything that's satisfactory, and just thought I would quit. So what happened, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about the life planning piece, but I basically sat down and had a time to reflect and just gave myself the time and the space to really reflect on what's important to me. Like, why am I even here? And I think a lot of us get to this point where we survived. We survived medical school. We survived all those exams that we had to take. We survived. And the most the last exam I had to take, to become an attending physician, to become like board certified physician, was an oral. Actually, that was second to last exam. I forgot that was an oral exam. Where for my primary specialty, where I had to drive I think I had to drive like 2 days from Vermont to Chicago, and I didn't want to fly because I was breastfeeding. I had like I think an 8 month old at the time. I was breastfeeding, and I'm like, well, what if at the airport they confiscate the milk? Then my baby would be hungry. Actually, I don't think that my baby was 8 months. It was, he was at the point where he only was. We were just doing breast milk, and I just remember like driving and then pumping and then driving and then pumping. And then I got to the test, I slept and then woke up and had this oral exam where four anesthesiologists in the room are, looking at you and asking you anything um, that they could ask you, right, about my specialty or medicine. And I did that. And, I finished and I'm like, I think that went okay. It didn't seem like I failed. And then my biggest pride was I did this, and I drove there and I did the breast pumping thing. And this is the type of stuff that we all go through, right? Whether it's, that ordeal or just like we just jumped through so many hoops, and we had so many late nights and so many days where we were operating on very little or no sleep. And finally, I got to the point where I was like, I don't even know who I am. All I know is that I could do it, right? Like I can do hard things. I can survive, but I was like, I don't even know what makes me tick anymore. And though, so finally I sat down and had this process of life planning, and it was like for rediscovering myself, rediscovering what makes me feel alive, rediscovering who I am, and the person who's like super passionate and driven and gung-ho, the person who's like energetic about life. And so when I had that like light bulb moment, like I actually made one discovery, which was I really like being a doctor. Maybe I don't like the circumstances that were right there in front of me, but I actually love seeing patients. I love connecting with my patients. I love what I do. And I was like, it would be so silly if I quit medicine just because, of one change in leadership that at the current workplace that I have, or, like one, and of course at that time there was COVID going on. So there's a lot of uncertainty. I think everybody was scared, even the administrators were. And so I just kind of had this shift where I was like, I have nothing to lose. I thought I was just going to quit. So why don't I just stay here and do my best, advocate, start speaking up, start trying to change my experience as a physician. So that's what I did. Now it's been, I think, a little, about 2 years ago. And the first, I'm trying to, it's kind of all a blur. I just remember I would go into work and I would sort of like dread. I would sit in the parking lot and like dread going in and thinking, what if I run into this person? I really don't want to run into this person. I don't even know, how to react with my face if I see this one person. And after, that was before. And then after I had that time when I did life planning on myself and had that shift of this is who I am, this is what I really care about, and this is what gives me energy, it didn't really matter to me anymore. These people that I thought were kind of making my life miserable, quote unquote, right? Because they really weren't. I mean, they were just trying to, in retrospect, they were just trying to do what they thought was best and doing their job. And it may not have aligned with the goals that I have, for medicine and for my job, but I actually I gave myself more grace. I also gave others more grace because then I didn't, like, even the people who I thought was making my life miserable, I started looking at them more empathetically and not thinking that they were just there to make my life miserable. So I would go into the hospital after I had, my light bulb moment, And I actually had my head up, and I really didn't care if I ran into, people that I used to think were horrible. I actually saw them more as human beings who, had the same struggles that I do, who happens to be maybe in leadership positions that, on paper looked like they had power over my job. And so one of the first things was I brought a physician and associate clinician wellness program to my hospital. Where first, I was able to convince the administrators the value of physician coaching and just investing in physician wellness. And so they actually offered to pay like sort of like I think it was a 6 week long virtual program that consisted mostly of physician coaching for anybody that wanted to sign up, for any physicians or associate clinicians. So that went really well. I mean, everyone was busy and burnt out. So it wasn't like perfect attendance or anything, but people would come and I mean, I've gotten some feedback like, wow, that really helped me in my career. Like I was also thinking of quitting, which of course, when we think of we want to quit and we want to do this, you think that nobody else has that problem, right? And you feel like you're all alone. You feel like you're just suffering in the dark by yourself, which is not true because many people were thinking that. And I didn't know that. But when one of my colleagues shared that, that was the benefit that she got from this program that I brought to the hospital, I was just so touched. Like I was like, that made it worth it, right? If just one person had that shift of, I don't want to quit medicine either because I actually like what I'm doing. I just need to make some changes. So that was great. And then after that program, I was actually able to convince the hospital to um, have an annual benefit of physician coaching for both the physicians and the associate clinicians who want to, who want to participate. It's not, certainly not a mandatory, like you have to do this thing, but it's there as a resource. So that was so amazing. And again, I was working with some of the same administrators that I thought was trying to actively make my life miserable. So that was a real light bulb moment for me when I was like, yeah, I thought this person wasn't, pro physician wellness or, clinician wellness, but they're actually agreeing to, fund this. So yeah, that was the first. Another one, another amazing thing that happened was um, I and this is, a common thing that a lot of people struggle with, closing those notes at night. And I would, spend lots of hours after, like, I would have these great patient encounters, which I love and I felt energized by. But I'm like, oh, it takes just as long to write the note afterwards. And I, through kind of coaching on my own, through and then like resources like the EntreMD Business School that we're all part of, I just had this idea that, I mean, CEOs and executives have executive assistants. Why don't physicians have a scribe? Why is this not more commonplace? And maybe it is in some practices, but at my hospital, it was like unheard of. So I brought it up at one of the meetings when I was asked to kind of have more responsibilities in my role as a physician. That was kind of beyond the clinical responsibilities, and I thought, well, I like what I do in my clinical world, so I don't really want to cut down my patient hours, but I also have limited time in my week and limited energy. So what can we do? And I'm like, I think a scribe would be the perfect solution. So I brought this up. It took a lot of back and forth. I mean, so for the people who are listening, and you're like, yeah, there's this thing that I want to bring up, with my employer, or, with like a family member, anytime you want to negotiate something, don't expect a yes, because by definition it's going to be a new thing for you and for them. So give it time. So I had to. It wasn't like a yes at first meeting type of thing, but after a while, they bought in, and so amazingly, I got a scribe. And there were many roadblocks there too, because even after they said, "Yep, let's do this," it was really hard to find a scribe. There was a lot of things that, a lot of obstacles, but I held to this belief that what we do as physicians, it's valuable. It's not like anybody can do it. And so how do we work in our zone of genius, and the stuff that's sort of like just getting in the way, how can we delegate that, right? So I held to that belief. I'm like, I know it's possible. And I can't even tell you how long it took. It took a long time, but finally, when I got the scribe that showed up to work, was able to actually do the job, it was just so amazing. It was so worth it, worth the wait, worth the efforts. And so that was amazing, amazing kind of point also in my career that helped totally with career satisfaction. But what was even more amazing was when the hospital was kind of undergoing some changes, and a lot of physicians and other clinicians were feeling the burn and feeling like they were getting burned out. They actually offered this as a solution to anybody that wanted to have one. So not only did I kind of help make my life easier, this also became a tool for the hospital to retain physicians and other clinicians. So that was eye opening for me too. And so I've come to the point where I realize that it's our responsibility as physicians to negotiate, because nobody really knows what it's like to be in our shoes, and you can't expect them to, because the administrators who you might feel like have control of your life, they just are trying to do their job, and some of them are very well meaning, and so but they don't know all the struggles that we have. So it is up to us to communicate that in a way that they can help us. And so that's what we did. And look, I mean, now I'm a hospital. If you want a scribe, you can get one. And I now, to me, this is sort of a non-negotiable in my job now. I love having that tool, and I am happier every day as a result. So that's the backstory of, I was not always super happy in my job, but now I can say that.
That's really cool. And I know people watching are like, how did you do that? How do you bring it up? So, and by the way, anyone watching live, please feel free to ask questions to Dr. Gray, because she's just awesome. But I'm curious. So, in your chapter, Dr. Gray is chapter 1 in Made for More. Go out and get it. Proceeds go to stopping human trafficking. So Dr. Gray is chapter 1 of Made for More, and it's really quite a story. I will not spill the beans. But you had this life-changing event happen. Is that around the time you did the life planning? Because it seems like that would be, it's one of those types of events that really changes your life. I mean, that's like a event.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wrote in my chapter, and I'm so honored to be the first chapter. I was like totally shocked and like jaw dropped when Dr. Una showed me. And I'm like, wait, I'm the first chapter. That's crazy. But yeah, so I talked about how I was actually just finishing up in the middle of my last year, my last year of training in my fellowship year. And we had this house fire. And amazing thing was it was scary when it happened, but none of us ended up getting hurt. We lost everything, like our whole house, like the whole house burned to the ground. And I mean, it was traumatic, but what I got out of that was life is precious. We don't know. I mean, we assume that we're going to live at our ages, like when you're like a teenager, you think you'll live forever. When you're in your 20s, when you're in 30s, I mean, I think you still feel that, like even in your 40s, like it's amazing. I mean, I have had family members that got diagnosed with cancer in their 70s, and they're still like, but I thought I was going to live forever. I mean, so it's one of those human traits that we sort of have this, I don't know, this idea that we're invincible and that we are immortal until it really hits us, right? So for me, it just kind of happened a little bit earlier in my life, where I saw that, really, like, people, we can die. It's not something that we can take for granted, that life is limited. And so that was my first wake up call. That was actually, I did not go through life planning then. That one came, like, many years later, but that was my first wake up call. And actually, um, I was definitely burnt out, as a resident, because I had a baby during my intern year, so just almost by definition, that was going to be like just not going to be the easiest experience there. And so both my husband and I were burned out, actually. And after that event, I just it not that I have any regrets about what I do. Like, I still would do the same thing again. I might have done things a little bit differently, but I still would have finished my training and doing all of that. Um, but it just, like, I had this, it just became like very clear, like almost like a gut feeling, when like the night of the fire, I was like, wow, there were so many moments in my son's life that I just missed like, because I wasn't there. I was training. I was more worried about passing exam, and it just kind of clarified for me that I can't do that forever. Like I don't want to take life for granted. I don't want to take my loved ones for granted. And so I started becoming more courageous, I think. And the first courageous thing that and when I say courageous, we are talking about, I'm not like jumping off mountains, although I don't mind doing that, but I'm talking about deviating from sort of the prescribed path that we perceive. So physicians, we have a very, very prescribed path, right? We know we got to take the MCAT, we got to take the pre-med classes, we got to go through med school, and then the STEP exams. It's very prescribed, and in some ways, like that kind of helps us feel safe and secure. But once we become attendings, and even during the process, I mean, I didn't really get to explore all these things when I was training, but at whatever point along this journey you're in, we're all human, and we can't let go of that fact. Like we can't let go of that realization that we there are things in our life that's going to be more important than medicine. That's going to be more important than making sure that everyone's happy with you at work, and everyone doesn't get shocked when you tell them what you plan to do with your life. So the thing that I did that I called courageous was actually my husband was the one who brought it up. He was like, "You've been working really hard. Obviously we're both burnt out. What do you think of just working part time when you become an attending?" I'm like, "Are you crazy? Like that is the wildest thing I've ever heard. I've never met anyone that's done that." And why would anyone do that? I mean, I would love that because that would, I've never been able to just have like a free Tuesday. But I've never heard of that. You're crazy. But he's the one who first brought it up, and then of course I thought about it after my initial reaction, and so eventually I went for it. And I was like, yeah, it's a little crazy, but why not? Let's try it. So that's what I did when I interviewed for my first job out of residency. I just told them. I mean, first of all, they interview all kinds of candidates, right? People who are late career, mid career, for first job out of training. So they don't really care. Like most of the people who were thinking about the hiring, they were just thinking they need a doc there. They weren't thinking like this is bad and all of that. Um, and so really people didn't bat an eye when I said yes, I'm looking for a part-time position. They did not bat an eye. Not the physicians, not the recruiters. So that was an eye-opening thing for me because I'm like, whoa, I thought I'm doing this thing that's like totally crazy, but nobody else really cared. And then and then I mean, maybe somebody cared and maybe they didn't tell me, but it didn't really matter in the end. What worked in the end was I did find a part-time job, and I had multiple job offers. Excuse me, I'm getting over COVID, so you might hear me cough a little bit or sniffle. Um, and so it was that was my first like act of rebellion against traditional medicine, and it worked out great.
That's awesome. Yeah, just, do what you know is right, even if it's not what everyone else is doing.
Yeah. And
Totally.
I was scared. I was like, well, does that mean that I'm going to be a bad doctor? I'm not going to have enough cases. And I mean, there were a lot of things. And I had two specialties. My primary specialty is anesthesiology. And then my specialty training was sleep medicine. And it was, and I intended to keep both. I actually interviewed for kind of like both kind of positions and picked jobs where I could sort of do both. In the end, I did decide to not practice anesthesia anymore because not like at that point it wasn't like planned, but then we had a third kid, shortly after I became an attending, and it kind of just happened naturally. I was sad for a little bit, but then I realized yes, I'm sad mostly because I trained so hard to do that. I still have those knowledge. And I mean, of course, with procedural specialties, if you don't do it for a while, you really should have, retraining before you take care of patients on your own. But I mean, I'm always going to be an anesthesiologist, and I'm so happy in my day to day just practicing sleep medicine. So that worked out for me, and it was sort of a scary thing when I first kind of deviated from the path.
That's awesome. Well, I want to hear a little bit more about your life planning. So, tell me a little bit about what it would look like. Like, what exactly is most people, and before you, me included, like most people have not heard of life planning. So,
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Yeah. So there's a reason why people have not heard of life planning. So the backstory was when I was thinking I should quit medicine. And then I was like, I don't even know what I'm good at. I spent like most of, after college, I really just spent most of my energy either, getting into medical school. I was not a traditional medical pre-med student. So, I did like post-bac. So it was mostly like getting into medical school and then doing medical school. And then here I was, I think at that point I was probably when had like my midlife crisis or like thought to quit medicine. I think I was like I was not quite 40, but I think I was like about to turn 40 or just turned 40. So, it's like, I don't know what happened, but my 20s and my 30s, they just kind of left with a blink of my eye. And so the only thing that I knew that I was good at, because I also felt like I needed to teach myself when I finished training, was I learned how to sort of, I learned personal finances, kind of just like learned it for myself and started taking care of that part of our household. So it was like, maybe I should just quit medicine and become a financial advisor. Crazy, crazy thought. So that's when I joined so, of course, like when you have a crazy thought like that, you have to start somewhere. So I found a non-medical conference, and I'd never attended a non-medical conference that I could think of in my, kind of like since undergrad ended. And so I was in this conference with these financial advisors, and the conference was not just on financial advising; it was actually on life planning, and it's a branch off of financial advising where we want to ask, like, before you start saving all this money and investing and doing all this retirement planning, what are you doing it for? And so this came from a guy. This discipline started from a guy. His name is George Kinder, who I interview on my podcast. He's a really wonderful guy, and he's decades ago he started asking the question, like, what are you doing, like what do you want in your life, let's figure that out before we just save and like just kind of blindly go through a life. And so I went to this conference, and it was so they kind of did life planning on the attendees. Even like you could train to become a life planner. This was like one of the conferences where you could do that, but it was really kind of getting a taste of it. And so this is, my first non-medical conference, which means I can't use my CME money for. I think it was during the pandemic when it was kind of like, everybody's finances were a little bit unknown and the stock market was crashing. And I think I paid like $1,000. So when when the guy asked in the group, and this is on Zoom because nobody was meeting in person then, he was like, hey, who wants to volunteer to get life planning on? You'll probably find a lot of benefit out of this. And, you do have to tell the truth. Like, you cannot make stuff up. This is you in real life planning, but who wants to do it? And I was like, well, I paid $1,000. That's not tax deductible. So I am going to raise my hand. And so I did. And, basically the guy asked me all these questions and I had to answer. And so that was my first introduction to life planning. And what it is, it's very basic. I mean, I think a lot of the audiences may be familiar with life coaching. And I think life planning is very similar but in that the content life coaching is more broad. You can have life coaching in anything, including what you want in your life. Life planning is maybe more focused on what is it that you want in your life. And it's more structured that way. The questions that we ask are more structured that way. But it's also in a style that's very similar to life coaching in that, as the life planner, I'm not going to tell you what you want in your life. I'm helping you discover that. Right. So that was that's sort, I guess that's what it is. And if you like, I would love to share the 3 questions that we often start with in life planning. And these questions, I remember, I mean, that this was the beginning of, when I had that light bulb moment. Before I had the light bulb moment, I sat down and did these reflections, and it helped me get to my light bulb moment. But the question number 1, I'm going to paraphrase. They're like the words are very precise, but I'm going to paraphrase because I don't have the questions in front of me. But question number 1 is, imagine that you are financially secure. And, for the audience that's listening, you can start sort of even thinking in your head and your answers for this. You have enough money to take care of yourself for now and in the future. And if you have a family, you can also include your family in that. Um, so the question is, how would you change your life? Would you change your life? And if so, how would you change it? What would be different? And so don't hold back. You describe a life that is fully yours. This is your, your dream.
I'm
So
gonna do it. I'm doing it here. I'm writing down what I want here. Okay. So if you were totally financially secure, how would you imagine your life would be? Like how would you change it?
yeah, how would you change your life? And don't hold back. Don't think, well, and this is such a good exercise because most of us, if you kind of examine the intentions of, situations where we might accept something that is not doesn't feel right to us, or all this, like the stressors, or where we might compromise on some of the things that are important to us, oftentimes it's because of money, right? It's because maybe we feel insecure about money, we want to just pay the bills. I'm not saying it's wrong, it's just, and it's human nature. But
Mhm.
it's interesting when you are able to do a mind exercise, and it's not just a mind exercise, it's a heart exercise too, right? Like you want to answer from your heart and your mind.
Taking
But
notes here.
when you get
Doing
to
it.
there you go. Yeah, when you get
Engaging.
to imagine that, if what if that's not an issue? And there are people, I mean, we probably know people who are financial independent. It's not
Mhm.
like it's impossible to do. And so why not just why not? And I know that's one of my life goals, is to become financial independent. But it's not my only one. Like for me, it's more important to actually live and honor the things that are important to me even before reaching financial independence.
Mhm.
So yeah. Okay, so that's question number one. So that's a fun one. I can warn you that the next couple are a little bit more like serious and grave. So the next question. Now, don't assume that you're financially independent anymore. Just kind of think of this as a new start reset question. So you find out that you go to your doctor and you find out that you only have 5 to 10 years left to live. um, you don't have unlimited resources, but let's just think of the resources you have now. That's what you have. Um, and and so knowing that, how would you change your life? And or knowing that, what would you like? Is there anything you would change in your life, and how would you do it?
And the how seems to be the challenge because if you have the same, like when you're financially secure and like
Yeah.
money is no object, that's easy. But the how becomes, because
Well,
really it's very similar to the first one here, but this one requires, you know,
so this second question, you know, is more, getting at, hey, now let's consider that your time is limited, right? So your resources are not limited, but I think most of us who are listening, have some amount of resources, and probably we are, some of it is saving for the future and just planning for the future, right? But now, if you get the news that the future is actually just going to be 5 to 10 years,
mm,
um, how would you, what would you change about your life? And oh, and the other thing that I appreciate about this question was, the good news is, you're not going to be suffering in this time. So, you have like the health that you have now. But the bad news is you're not going to know whether it's, what that day will be like. Is it going to be 5 years? Is it going to be like 10 years? So just, having that information, is there anything you would change in your life?
that is such a good question because we should really all be living that way. Well, sort of. I mean, you still have to
It's a
make ends meet and
balance,
take care of people, but
right? It's a
huh.
balance.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm gonna
So,
sleep on this one.
yeah.
'Cause how do you make that happen? Like you can move to a smaller house. You can, huh?
Which some
Okay.
people do. I mean, what a lot of people will say, that, because I've done this with clients and lots of different people. A lot of oftentimes they'll be like, "Well, I don't have to save for retirement anymore," so they're
That's true, actually.
and then and then and then if they have some kind of savings, they might say, maybe I want to share this, like have an experience, like share, like bring family together and have an experience, or bring friends together. So I think oftentimes people will kind of maybe be a little bit more generous with maybe their resources, possibly with themselves or with others. And then, but then it's also, if you only know that you have 5 years with your loved ones, what do you want to do with them, right? Like, so what's that? What would that look like?
That's really good. Actually, you know what? That's a good point that you're no longer saving for retirement. So that makes it a
Mhm.
lot easier. Okay, cool. Yeah, awesome.
So the last question that the part of the three questions that we start with. So this one is a little bit more serious. So you go to your doctor, and this time you were told that you only have 24 hours left to live. Yeah. So you will notice the feelings that arise as you confront your own mortality,
Mm,
and ask yourself, what did I miss? What did I not get to do? Who did I not get to be?
mm,
And so it's it's a reflection, um, and so, like, saying, like, what did I not get to do? um, you know some people may think, the planners and us may think, well, let's go get my will straightened out, or let me figure out this trust. Like, so that's not what that's talking about. I mean, you can certainly do that, but what we're talking about is, let's sit in those feelings of, wow, like, this is real. Like, I am mortal, and I am not going to live more than 24 hours. What? Let's look back on my life, and what is it that what is it that I miss? Or what did I not get to do? Who did I not get to be?
yeah, that's really a good question. And it's so interesting. I mean, I think about this question a lot actually. Like, maybe not in the 24-hour sense, but if I were to die today, am I happy with what I spent my time doing? And that's where your chapter actually like really hit home for me because I'm like, I think about that stuff. Like if I were to have a house fire, if I were to maybe whatever, you hear stories about like people who win the lottery are not very happy, and yet people who get these terminal diagnoses or lose their legs or
Mm,
something, they end up actually happier than they were before.
mm,
And that's what the your chapter did for me. Actually, someone commented, I feel that totally. I mean, that's just so big. Are we living according to our true values? And that's where, the way that you changed your job to make one that you enjoy is huge. And it's a big part of why I do that because life is short. Man,
yeah.
that's huge. So is that a big part of what gave you that confidence to then go to your administration and make those changes is because of the life planning?
Yes, so like I was saying, life planning was what kind of helped me bring up who I was, like who I
Yeah.
am. Because, like I said, it's so easy to forget that after we've gone through this whole, like, this rigorous training where we were had to live with, all sorts of challenges. And so, yeah, once I figured it out, I'm like, I actually went into medicine because I wanted to save the world. Like, I wanted to be a patient advocate. I wanted all those things. And it really hasn't changed. Like, those are the things that energize me. And so, yeah, I actually got to the point where I'm like, I don't feel like I have anything to lose. I mean, I guess they could fire me. That's always a possibility. That's always what people are afraid of, right? When they do speak up at work, or they do a little, they go outside of the box a little bit. But I'm like, I was actually thinking of quitting
You're gonna
medicine.
leave
So,
anyway, so big deal. I
let's say,
remember one time I got a call from my boss. I was in a job that I was so unhappy. And I remember he was about to call me, and I thought, God, I hope he fires me. And then, but at the same time, I was like, oh, but that would kind of suck. And then, we got off the phone, and then I had such mixed, like complete opposite feelings. Like, whew, I didn't get fired. But then on the other hand, I was like, oh man, dang it. Now I still have to quit. So,
I I think so. So life planning gave me that confidence in myself again, gave me that clarity of, who am I? Why do I want to be here? And what would I regret if I were to die in 5 or 10 years or tomorrow? And those things become, and the more time you spend visualizing it and talking about it, whether it's with another person, which is, in play planning, that's what we do. We facilitate that. But also just, as you spend time even reflecting for yourself, it becomes more real and it becomes more important and it's more in the forefront of your consciousness. And so I think we all owe it to ourselves to just be more comfortable with who we are, why we want to be here, and and the thing is, I've learned over time is if I don't do that, I just become a resentful person. I'm or sort of like a disgruntled, resentful person, and that's not who I am. That's not the person I want to be. And so that's usually how I go about my day, whether it's at work or with my family. If something happens and I'm like, if this happens every day, I'm probably going to get really resentful because I maybe I don't feel like it's fair, or maybe it just, I just don't feel like it's optimized. So it's not about being selfish. It's about, um, I think it's about communication, because I like I said before, I feel like I can't. I feel like it's my responsibility to 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 make it a better system for everybody. So when I share maybe problems that I'm facing as a physician, that's maybe happening in my day. I mean, recently we went through an electronic medical record transition, and those are like the most stressful things that the hospital can go through, and from all angles, but especially for the physicians and clinicians. And and again, I mean, I like there's many messages and back and forths I had with my practice manager, because I'm like, this part really stinks. Like, how do we make this better? How can we have the support staff utilize this function so that every single time when I open the message or when one of my colleagues open the message, we're not just gonna like cringe because the functions are so bad. And so nobody else is gonna know that better than we do because we're the ones who use it. So it's little things like that that I think makes a big difference at the end of the day or the end of the year, how satisfied we are in our life and in our work.
Yeah, it's very true. And I totally hear what you're saying about communication and seeing your administrators as people, because as much as they drive us up the wall, I mean, anyone that's been in leadership knows that we're not always able to make the changes that people are asking for, even if we want those changes ourselves and they affect us too. And, that's so big to be able to understand, the administrators do want to do that. Maybe they do want to do coaching for the physicians or scribes for the physicians, but understanding that maybe that's out of their control or whatever it is. But goodness gracious, like how are they supposed to know if we don't tell them, right?
That's exactly it. And it's planting a seed in someone's mind. And even if they're completely resistant, it's okay. In fact, it doesn't bother me one bit when I bring up a new idea and someone's completely resistant. Because I'm like, I kind of expect that. Some people are
Mhm.
maybe a little bit more open to ideas than others, but it's okay. That has nothing to do with my idea. At least I brought it out there. And maybe each of us can think of a time, whether it's like our kid that asked us something, or maybe colleague or somebody in our life that asked us a request. And I'll just give a really silly example, right? Like my 6-year-old recently was like, my brothers have a robot, why don't I have a robot toy? And my first response when she said that, just even like reflexively, was, you guys already have too many toys and my house is too cluttered. I don't really want to buy you a robot toy and have more pieces around the house. But she planted the seed in my mind, and I don't think I was like all open arms about it. I was like, I don't know, I hear you, but so and that was me, like, with a lot of parenting training, right? Like that was like, if it was me like 5 years ago, I'd probably be like, oh no, the house is way too messy. I've kind of learned to tone that down a little bit, but in my mind I was resisting. And so, but she planted the seed, and guess what I did? A few days later, I went on Amazon and see, is there a robot that's for girls? I haven't found one yet, but she planted the seed, and that's and every one of us, has had that experience where we were on the receiving end of a request that we're like, this is not what's been on my mind. Why are you bringing something up that I have not really been thinking about? It has not been my problem until you told me this request. And you might be resistant, but after a while, if you hear somebody else say, Oh, I have this robot that I'm giving away. I mean, guess what? The first thing you're going to think about is, oh, yeah, my daughter said she wanted a robot. So it's the same thing. If I say, I really want to scribe, this will help me do my job better. And then they're like, no, 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 that's way too much money. But then, somebody else may see it, or they might hear somewhere else that, oh, there's a scribe service. And guess what? The human brain is going to turn on and make that connection. And the more of these touch points that you have, the better. It's always a win. So it's always like that. There's never a loss in communicating. And I do the same thing when I communicate with the administrators. I'm listening into their problems, right? Because maybe I can help them solve some of their problems, and I do. It's both ways.
Yeah, and I'll continue that analogy of the kids. When my kids scream at me, "I need a new watch." Well, guess what? I'm not going to get them a new watch. But if they're like, "Hey, mom, I'd love a new watch." Well, guess what? They may plant a seed. It's kind of like them breaking me down to get all the animals we have in the house, gerbils and hamsters, and we have them all because they asked nicely multiple times, and and they proved to me that they could be responsible and take care of them. I mean, I was not very good at taking care of my younger daughter's hamster, so the older one took over and takes great care of the hamster because she's already taking care of her gerbils, which she broke me down for. Like, but that's true. Like, she asked nicely. She was really, well behaved and respectful. And, obviously, as physician, we don't use the word well behaved, but but we can ask our administrators respectfully and, plant the seed and just speak to them like they're human beings and like, you're on the same side because really in the end you are. Maybe the goal is a little bit differently. Like, we are putting patients first and they're trying to run a hospital that's profitable. But in the end, it's all the same. And so, I really, yeah, I mean, what you're saying, it makes so much sense about, speak to them nicely, plant the seeds, see their perspective, see how you can help them too. That's so huge. So anyone watching, like, please give a thumbs up or fire emojis or something because that's huge. Let's. This is how we change the hospital systems. We communicate. We just
So
communicate.
let's continue this kid analogy, because this is actually, I think, where adults can learn a lot from kids. I don't know about you, at least the three kids that I have, even the one who's really reserved, they're pretty quick in telling us what they want. So this is, so we start with life planning or reflection, and kind of figuring out what is it that we want, and get clarity on that, and get confidence and clarity on that, and then speak up early, right? So because you don't want to get to the point where you felt so resentful and so discouraged and so burnt out, and so disengaged, and then you're like, I just want to blow up, and that's the only time that you say something to administration, right? Because that's going to be hard. That's at that point, first of all, it's going to take time to make any change. And they're human too, so it's hard, when someone lashes out, when anyone, even, when our patients lash out at us, it's hard. And so same thing for administrators, when physicians are so discouraged that they lash out. So we want to speak up early. We want to, when we're thinking, hey, we want this, like, we want this toy, we want this gerbil, we want this robot, we want a scribe, speak out early. And it doesn't have to be a scribe. I mean, like I said, every little tweak. When I first started my practice as a new attending, I got so many patient messages where it just says, "Hi, patient called and wants you to give them a call back." And as a new attending, I'm like, okay, well, that's what the staff wrote, so I'm going to give them a call back. And then I realized I would call them back and they would cancel their next appointment with me. So they already got what they needed. And
Mhm.
so I've tweaked that. I actually, wrote a script for my staff. And so if the patients call, which of course they're going to ask for the doctor to call them back, it's no copay when they do that. And so they already know what to say. And I'm like, don't ever even pass this message on to me. It's wasted energy on your part. It's wasted energy for me. And I've never gotten that again. So, I mean, I have to train them a little bit throughout, remind them. But, years later, this is not a non-issue, not just for me, but for everybody in my practice, because everybody else agreed that that's a good system. And so it's little things like that, right? And it starts with me saying, if I do this every single time, I'm going to feel resentful. and then because I don't want to do this, and then you make a change from that.
Yeah, you're so empowered to make the changes that, we're all as physicians, we complain about these same things over and over again, and you've actually gone ahead and made the changes. You're like, this needs to change, and then you change it. So I really hope that people are watching this and are able to make those changes for themselves too, because, I know that probably, almost everyone watching this is feeling the same way, because it's the same things that we hear over and over again. And I totally agree, where I speak with physicians all the time who are calling me for a new job, or saying, hey, I don't know if I want to leave medicine entirely. And the complaints have nothing to do with medicine. It's all to do with the charting and the not being able to make changes, or not being able to, schedule flexibility, and all the things have nothing to do with medicine. And if we can just fix those little things, then you end up like you did. Like, you hated it and you were ready to quit. And then you're like, hey, what have I got to lose? I'm going to leave anyway. And then you made it into something you love. So, um, yeah, that's awesome.
And I want to tell physicians it's totally doable. There's nothing magical about me. Like it's just I'm just another physician. I don't I really, I mean, that was my goal in life, was to be, I mean, when I figured out what I wanted to do when I grow up, after I graduated college, I'm like, I just, I once I figured out I wanted to go to med school, I'm like, I just want to be a doctor and help patients and, advocate for them. Like it's nothing, there's nothing magical. Like I didn't have aspirations of being like the CEO of a hospital, and I still don't, right? It's just you just do you want, if you stay true to what you love to do, and then work with that, then anybody can do it. There's nothing magical about my journey. It's just I just started. I went on a journey, and here I am.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that. And thank you for talking today. I really hope that we can change someone's thoughts on medicine, and, make people realize how awesome it is. We're so lucky. So with your life planning, do you work one-on-one? Do you work in groups? All of the above? How does that work?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I've done both. I'm of sort of my um, conviction is I personally love one-on-one. I do like groups too, but even when I had my group, I would do one-on-one and group. So currently, if anybody, so first of all, I take notes on the three questions, because those are free. They're I actually have a podcast episode called "The Three Most Important Questions." I think it's one of my earlier episodes. So it's available out there, and start reflecting on what's important to you, what do you really want in your life, and get some clarity out of that. And I, for anyone who actually wants to work more closely with someone, and to kind of do more formalized life planning, I'm happy to work with them. I actually usually post something on my website, but lately I've sort of might have been too busy with doing too many things that I don't have any official information on my website. But if you reach out to me through social media, LinkedIn, for example, DM me on any of the social media platforms, I'd be happy to work with you, especially because you are Dr. Hoffman's people. So, I love to help, all of Dr. Hoffman's physicians out there. But yeah, that's really, it's the one-on-one where I feel like where the magic is, and because I see those light bulb moments go on. I see I see the sort of the progression of, I'm not really sure what I want, like, and then to, wow, like I feel like I'm living my dreams. And it's just, it's the most amazing thing. And I think, we owe it to ourselves. Like, I think in my chapter, I think I ended up with, we don't have time to waste, because we don't know how long we'll live. Like, life is precious. Even if we live till we're 90, let's not waste our time. Let's make the most out of the life that we have. And we all owe it to ourselves to live our dreams.
Yeah, I love that. Well, let's end on that. Dare to dream, guys. Dare to dream. Thank you so much for joining us. What is your website for people to go find you?
Yeah, so you can find me at daretodreamphysician.com. And the podcast is available on, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, same name, Dare to Dream Physician.
And it's a good podcast. I love it. I could listen to your voice forever. I think you have a very melodic, beautiful voice.
Yeah,
Um,
just the disclaimer, my voice today is recovering from COVID, so you might hear a different voice when you hear
it
the
doesn't sound
podcast.
like you normally. Well, cool. Yeah. Anyone interested in life planning? I mean, Dr. Gray inspires me, so I know she'll inspire you too. And absolutely reach out to her. And if you're looking for a new job, please let me know. I would love to help you find something so awesome. And I will stay with you through the whole process where we can talk about all your interviews before and after and prepare together. And of
No,
course, if you want to start your own practice, I can help you with that too. So reach
oh,
out to me, www.happydayhealth.co. That is not .com. And reach out to me for that. Reach out to Dr. Gray if you're not sure if you want to stick with medicine or not, or you know what you want and you don't know how to make it happen. That is what she do, and she's the bomb. So thanks for joining us today, and please comment on what you thought in the comment bar.
thank you so much for having me, and I love what you do. I think it's so amazing. I mean, if I had that your service when I first graduated, it would have been so valuable. Like this is
Hmm,
amazing
thank
that what you
you.
do for physicians.
Thanks. And I even have a really cool sleep position right now. So I would even have one for you right now. All right. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining.